So let's do a quick review of homework exercise 1. Now the instructions on this exercise are pretty simple. Consider each of the following cases and answer the subsequent questions. So case number 1, you wish to have voters in your town support a tax cap proposal that will limit to the rate of inflation the amount city officials may raise taxes in any given year. So we have 4 questions here. The first one, what is the status quo? Now remember, status quo refers to the way things are now, the current policy. So if we go back to the case, you wish to have voters in your town support a tax cap proposal, that will tell us that the status quo is the current tax rate. That is the current policy with regard to raising of taxes in the municipality. There is presumably no current cap on the rate of tax increases, and so the status quo is the current tax policy. Second question is, who has the burden of proof? Well, if you're the one making the proposal, and it says you wish to have voters in your town support a tax cap proposal, then you and those who support the proposal with you have the burden of proof. It is the person who is proposing the change in the status quo who also has the burden of proof, who must provide good and sufficient reasons for changing the current policy. So you would be in the affirmative, and so you would have the burden of proof. Third question, what is the presumption? Now, presumption, remember, goes with the status quo. That is to say, the presumption is the status quo is fine just the way it is until someone gives good reasons why it should be changed. So the presumption is that the current tax policy without a tax cap is perfectly okay. Right? We start with that presumption. Perhaps you'll be able to give good reasons why it should change, but at the beginning of the debate, the presumption is things are fine the way they are. And then finally, who is in the negative? So we already said you're the one making the proposal. That puts you in the affirmative with the burden of proof. So those who are in the negative are those who are against your proposal, those who don't think we need a tax cap proposal. So anybody who denies that proposal or opposes that proposal would be in the negative. So let's take a look at the second case. You are 19 years old and arrested for illegal possession of alcoholic beverages. Now, we know this has never happened to any UNH student, but so we'll look at it as a hypothetical case. In such a case, what is the presumption? So this would be a matter of criminal justice. It would be a legal matter. And so, as in all legal cases, the presumption is a presumption of innocence. So the person arrested, the 19-year-old who's arrested for illegal possession of alcoholic beverages, enjoys the presumption of innocence. The presumption is that he or she is innocent until proven guilty. So who has the burden of proof? Well, if you're charged with a crime, you're almost always charged in the name of the state. And so it is the state, which would be in the person of the prosecutor or the district attorney or whoever it is that is bringing the charges against you in court. Could be the police officer who arrested you, who is also on a district court level acting as a prosecutor. Whoever is bringing the charge against you has the burden of proof. That person has to provide evidence sufficient to convince the judge and or the jury that you violated the law against possession of alcoholic beverages by anyone under 21. So the third question then is, what is the point of issue? Now, as we said when we talked about points of forensic stasis, or issues in legal cases, the point of issue might be any one of 4 possible points of issue. In this case, it could be that you could say you did not possess alcoholic beverages, in which case it would be a question of fact, or the point of issue would be the first issue, the factual issue. So if the state says you possessed alcoholic beverages illegally and you say you did not, then it would be an issue of fact. If for some reason you acknowledged possession of the alcoholic beverages, but you deny that you had them for your own use, that you were merely transporting them as part of your job, for instance, right? Then we could define the possession of alcoholic beverages differently. The state would say it's illegal possession, and you would say, no, it's not illegal possession. It was required by my job. And in that case, the issue would be one of definition. Perhaps also we could think of an instance where you acknowledge that you possessed alcoholic beverages. You know that possession by a person under 21 is illegal, but you point out the fact that somebody who you know was injured and there was no antiseptic available, so you rushed down to the liquor store to buy a bottle of whiskey to use as an antiseptic. All right, so here you would be arguing not that you didn't possess it or that it wasn't illegal to possess it, but you were arguing because of the circumstances it would be justifiable. And that would be a question or an issue of quality, the third of the forensic issues. It's also possible, I suppose, that you could argue either jurisdiction or procedure. So if you were caught, let's say, on campus possessing alcoholic beverages and you were taken to Durham District Court, you could say, well, this is a campus matter. I should have a hearing before the Office of Community Standards, not before the Durham District Court. So there you would be arguing jurisdiction. Or you could say, well, the campus police officer searched my backpack without my permission and without a warrant. So there you would be arguing procedural issues of fairness or illegal search. And so either on jurisdiction or procedure, you would be arguing on that fourth forensic issue, the translative issue. So it depends here. The answer to question C here is that it depends really on how you approach your defense. That is, where you situate the point of controversy between you as the defendant and the prosecutor who's bringing the charge against you. So let's look at case number 3. You deliberately steal a car so that you can drive your gravely injured friend to a hospital for immediate care. You are charged with grand theft auto. So what is the point of issue? Now in this case, like the previous one, it seems pretty clear that the question of fact is not in dispute. It says you deliberately steal a car. So we know the car is in your possession. It doesn't belong to you, so you stole it. We also know then that you have been charged with grand theft auto. Auto theft obviously is a crime. You acknowledge that you had possession of the car, you had it illegally, that you stole the car, so there isn't any question of definition. But here the question is the reference to the circumstances. That is, what are the mitigating factors in this case that might justify or excuse your stealing of a car? In this case, you have a gravely injured friend who needs to get to the hospital, so you steal the car to get that person to the hospital. You would be essentially asking a judge or a jury to say, take into consideration these circumstances and understand and excuse that this is why I had to steal the car, or my theft of the car was justified by my greater obligation to help an injured friend. So if that's what you're arguing, which would seem to be obviously the point of issue in this case, you would be arguing on the issue of quality. So then, who has the burden of proof? It's a little bit more complicated than it may ordinarily seem. In a forensic trial, obviously, the person bringing the accusation or making the charge has the burden of proof, so the prosecutor has the burden of proof. But because you're making a qualitative argument, that is, you're arguing on the issue of quality, you also have some obligation to provide evidence that the circumstances here justify or excuse your violation of the law. And so while the prosecutor has the burden of proof to prove that you stole the car, you would have a burden of proof after you made your claim about the necessity or justification for doing that. You would have a burden of proof to show that the circumstances justified or excused that violation of the law. You may have to, for instance, provide your injured friend to give testimony, or you may have to provide medical documents from the hospital after your friend was taken to the emergency room. All of that would give evidence that helped to justify or excuse your violation of the law. So what is the question then for the jury? So remember that we said every issue, that is every point of controversy, there's two sides on the issue, but the issue then also creates a question. And so the question for the jury here would be something like, did the injury to the friend and the necessity of getting hospital care immediately, did those circumstances justify or excuse the stealing of the car? That would be the essential question that the members of the jury would have to answer. So then, case number 4, the last of the cases here. You oppose a recommendation made by the Student Senate to change UNH credit allocations from 4 credits to 3 credits per academic course. Of course, UNH is unusual in that it gives 4 credits for most courses. Most other colleges and universities allot 3 credits for a standard academic course, and perhaps the Student Senate is looking to bring UNH in line with most other colleges and universities. But you oppose such a policy. You oppose the recommendation made by the Senate to change those credit allocations. So first question, do you have the burden of proof? Now here, notice that it's the Student Senate who's seeking to change UNH credit allocations. That is, they seek to change the policy. They're the ones that have put forward the proposition. And so it's the Student Senate that has the burden of proof. In opposing that policy, you do not have the burden of proof. Rather, you have the presumption. That is, you're defending the status quo. You want to keep things the way they are. So you have benefit of presumption on the negative side. Then who is in the affirmative? We kind of just answered that question, but who is in the affirmative? It's the Student Senate, or the members of the Student Senate who are proposing to change UNH credit allocations from 4 to 3 credits per course. So anybody who is in favor of changing the current policy would be in the affirmative. They would be the ones who are affirming the proposition. And what is the proposition? Question C. So the proposition in this case would be whatever the wording of the proposal is, but something like the University of New Hampshire should change its credit allocations from 4 credits to 3 credits per academic course. The proposition would be the statement, the claim that seeks to change the current policy. The proposition is always challenging the status quo. And then, so what is the status quo? The last question here. The status quo is the current credit policy. So currently, UNH allots 4 credits for most academic courses. That's the current policy. It's the way things are now. So the status quo is simply the current policy. So that's a review of homework exercise 1. And now we can move on to the next lesson.